Redditors who had someone try to murder you. What happened? Oh my god, some of these are terrible, and especially scary considering some were attacked randomly by strangers. And I'm so sorry to all those who experienced something like that. I was almost murdered by mother-in-law. She's literally the devil. She thought I was trying to keep her baby, no, not her son, my husband. She was calling my oldest kid her baby. She also thought I trapped my husband by getting pregnant. We were together for nearly 8 years at that time, and married for 4 when I got pregnant. Anyways, she tried to set me up. One day I walked into my home with my oldest son while I was pregnant. I quickly run into the bathroom to grab a towel or something. In there I found my middle covered in her own blood holding a knife. She starts to yell, I'm in shock, and then attacks me. She keeps saying how dare I try to kill her and take her away from her baby, and how I was trying not to deprive my son from her love. I was trying to protect myself and of the bathroom while trying to calm her down. At this point she stabs me in the chest when trying to stab my stomach. You're a slut and a whore. My baby doesn't deserve you. How could he marry someone who tried to kill his mama? At this point I'm really in shock and realize she was trying to make it look like I attacked her and she was defending herself. I managed to run out and I yell at my son to go to X's house next door and a family friend and get help, which he does. I barricade myself in our office room. It had these heavy oak doors and try to control my bleeding. Milla's outside banging on the door complaining how I'm jealous of her and the love and relationship she shares with her son and my son, and how I'm trying to isolate them from her. Anyways, cops came, she was arrested, and I ended up in the hospital and lost the baby. My ex was extremely violent and controlling. He was trying to make me pregnant so I would be dependent on him and never leave him. Basically, he found out I'd been taking birth control pills. He poured boiling water over me as I slept and stabbed me multiple times. Thankfully a neighbor heard my screams and called the police. English is not my first language, so I'm sorry for any errors. Anyway, the story is about my father who really liked to drink 24/7. He would often get angry and throw stuff around or threaten complete strangers, but he never harmed me or my brother, so we got used to it and just ignored it most of the time. But one day he got into a fist fight with some random guy at the gas station, where he liked to drink for 20 hours straight, and when he got home he was in a really bad mood. I took my brother and we left the apartment to go play football with the other kids in the park. At some point, while we were playing, I lost the key to the basement that I had with me because our ball was locked in there, and when we got back home I told my father that I lost the key. He got so angry you wouldn't believe it. He started screaming and threw bottles and other stuff at us. He grabbed my brother, who was 6 years old, and punched him as hard as he could, and while I dragged him to the bed so he could lie down, my father called my mother and told her that he's going to end it and she can come pick up the corpses in an hour. I heard this and locked the door to our room, which made him even angrier. He was trying to break down the door with his bare hands. That didn't work, so he tried breaking the lock with a knife. Suddenly I hear some really loud noises followed by a bunch of voices yelling. The police broke the door to the apartment and stormed in. Father got arrested. My mother was so scared she looked like she was about to die, and I had to talk to a police officer for an hour about what happened. My father was not allowed to contact us again after this, but sometimes he would hang out in the street where our new apartment was, or he would come to our school and pretend that he was there to pick us up. He died 2 years later when he started a fight with some homeless guys and they beat him up and threw him down some stairs, broke his skull, and he died on the way to the hospital. I have never ever shed a single tear for that asshole. This pales in comparison to some of the horror that these others folks have posted, but here goes. I had been dating a woman for about a year and we thought we would try living together. She started having dreams of me talking to other women. I laughed and thought she was just having some crazy dreams. One night a few weeks later I wake up to what I recognize as thin aluminum falling onto wood and then the tile floor, but I ignore it, just the cat. The next day my brother tells me that my girlfriend confessed to him that she had almost beat my brains in with a baseball bat that night, a thin aluminum baseball bat. Later I talked about splitting up and she would get suicidal. After a year of this constant fear and physical as well as mental abuse, I managed to convince her to leave me. It was okay, since it was her idea. It wasn't simple. She married a few months later and came by to introduce him to my family. He realized how weird it was. About 4 years later, and I haven't heard from her in over a year. Stay safe, folks. When I was 17, I was home one night sitting in the dining room of my parents' house while on the phone. Since the conversation went on for a couple hours, talking to some girl, I got up from my seat to lay down on the floor and stretch out. It had just gotten dark, and as I bent over to lay down, I heard a bang, saw a flash, and noticed the curtain over the window behind my chair floating down from the ceiling. It took me a couple seconds, then I realized someone had shot a gun into the house where I was just sitting. So, I ran over to check on my mother. Her room had windows leading to where the shooter was, and make sure she was alright. She was. Then, with all the lights off and no weapon, I head out the back door in hopes of coming around the side of the house to catch whoever the hell had just tried to shoot me. In retrospect, this was not a good plan. Fortunately, the shooter had gone, and I was left waiting for the police. Based on the investigation, the police determined that someone had been in our front yard, waited for my mother's bedroom light to turn off. It illuminated the front area. House was on a hill, then shot into our dining room window from the porch. The bullet went through the front window, into our kitchen, and lodged in our refrigerator. The trajectory passed right through where my head would have been, had I not laid down. The shooter was never found, and the police chalked it up to gang violence, since I was a young Latino. My mother was abusive. When she couldn't hit me anymore because of her arthritis, she would encourage my younger autistic sister to hit me, usually while our mom watched. As I got older, it escalated. There was this time in high school where I had decided to really fight back. I didn't care anymore about being punished for hitting back, but my sister was bigger than me, so she kicked my ass. Then when she was done kicking me, she got on top of me and started to choke me. I watched her squeeze her hamster to death a few years before, so I thought she would kill me too, and she had already threatened it a bunch of times before. I woke up on the floor of the living room with my sister crying next to me. She told me she thought I was dead, and that she was sorry. She had never apologized to me before for anything, so I just kind of sat there confused for a minute. She couldn't stop sobbing, so I ended up comforting her and telling her that it was going to be okay. When I was in the 5th grade, there was a plot to set me on fire. Why exactly, I don't know. I used to have to walk through a forest to get home every day from school, and over time this gigantic pit was dug by some of my schoolmates. A teacher overheard some kids talking about something odd, yanked one aside, and he spilled the beans. I guess the day it was supposed to happen, the principal pulled both me and my brother aside and had our parents come get us while a janitor went out to investigate. He caught a group of kids with a small can of gas and some of them playing with matches. That was an interesting day. I was on the highway, in the passing lane. My lane was merging into the next lane. I signal, and everything is clear for me to move over when a large pickup truck speeds up and prevents me from moving over. I brake hard, honk my horn, and move over behind the truck. I'm in a '69 Volkswagen Beetle BTW. He didn't like me honking at him. He's in front of me, but starts shadowing my every move, changing lanes when I change them, etc. He motions for me to pull over. I just want to get away from this guy at this point, so I start to pull over to the side of the road and then quickly pass him when he starts to do the same. This was a bad move on my part, since we were in traffic and I couldn't really get away from him. He eventually pulls alongside of me and says, "I'm going to run you off the fucking road," and rams the side of my car with his truck. I brake hard, and he brakes with me, again ramming my car with his truck. He pulls in front of me and motions for me to pull over again. We are approaching an exit that I want to use to get away from him, so at the right moment I fake a turn into the next lane to the left, and at the last moment, cut across to the exit, where I was able to get away from him. I contacted the police and provided them with a license plate number, description of the vehicle and driver. The guy lived several towns over, and it took about 2 weeks before the police were able to contact him. There was no damage to his truck, and he denied having any confrontation with me. I had arranged several meetings with the police to talk with them more about the incident, but the police officer didn't show up to any of them. They also suggested that I may have hit a wall on the highway and decided to blame this random person. I guess the large tire marks on the side of my car wasn't enough to convince them. I still remember his license plate number. One night my two stepbrothers and were walking down a dimly lit road beside a railroad switchyard at about 10 o'clock at night. As we were walking, a white truck drove by. We didn't notice that it turned around and drove toward us again. As it got closer, someone in the truck started shooting at us. Scared shitless, we took off running for the switchyard in the cover of the rail cars. We ran through the switchyard while someone in the truck screamed "squeal pig" as we were all three pretty large. Eventually we reached the highway and ahead where a cop was taking his break. I've never been more frightened in my life. I could hear the bullets hitting the rail cars. I'm a Hispanic going to school in Arkansas. Anyone familiar with Arkansas knows about Harrison, and Harrison isn't too friendly to people of my skin tone. I went on a road trip with a couple of my teammates, and we are headed back to campus. I had to take a huge piss, but we were driving through Harrison, so I told them to make a stop after we cleared town. Turns out Harrison is a bit bigger than we all thought. I get off alone at this gas station and the clerk gives me a funny look. Alright, it's a small town. It's 2 AM. He doesn't recognize me. He has the right to be suspicious. I take my piss and start walking back to the car. I get out the building and I see two of the most stereotypical rednecks I have encountered in my life. Baseball caps, long beards, flannel, faded levy, and boots. I freeze. They freeze. They look at me, at each other, their lifted truck they just hopped out of, and back at me. I'm there thinking, what the fuck do they have in that truck? My buddies notice, and the heavyweight riding shotgun hops out and puts his hands up as they start walking towards me. I dive in the back seat, he hops back in, and we peel out like we're in a fucking episode of Dukes of Hazzard. Fuck racists. My girlfriend's ex ambushed us coming home one night around 1 AM. He stepped from the garage and shot me in the chest. Then as my girlfriend pushed her son toward the dark bushes and told him to run, she tripped and fell. He shot her 6 times in the head and chest with a .357, reloaded, and was scared off by the blazing security lights of our neighbor. Her son escaped because of the lights. I lived by playing dead, pulled my cell out when he ran off, and misdialed an old roommate because I thought holding 9 on a Nokia dialed 911. Got 911 and cops/paramedics showed up after her son helped get a rag to cover what I thought was one hole. Necklace I was wearing deflected the bullet, novelty dog tag, and bullet went sideways out chest and into arm. 1 bullet, 3 holes, for when they cut it out of my arm on other side where it stopped just under the skin. Her son is pretty fucked up by it all, to say the least. I've recovered mentally, I think. Lesson: don't get involved with crazy fucks. Screw the restraining order and move somewhere they won't find you. Your life isn't worth staying where you are and hoping. She was killed a day after she had the restraining order served. They only make things worse if someone thinks they'll have you or no one will. I had gotten into an argument with my then boyfriend over the trash can getting too full in the kitchen, so his response was to flip the rubbish bin over and then attempt to strangle me to death in the resulting garbage chaos. I lost a lot of friends, family, and hair in the ensuing year. It's a difficult process and unfortunately, I pushed away friends that could have helped me, and the police station handled it poorly, resulting in me not meeting with a DV advocate, and I wasn't able to manage my communication with the Attorney General's office in my state, because I was literally going crazy. I didn't go to the court date, so his felony dropped to a misdemeanor. It was 4 years ago. My no contact order expired, so I've been trying to get a restraining order against him. I feel like I'm being punished for not showing up the first time, because my next court date, next week, will be the 7th time I've appeared before the judge. It's not this great, uplifting thing to survive. It's horrible, it's ugly, it gets its claws deep under your flesh, and it doesn't let go. You feel it in your muscles, and in your sleep. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever get up off of my kitchen floor, but I think the reality of it is that it's gone from something that was done to me to something that belongs to me, like a twisted extra limb that grew out of my back to flop over my shoulder. I deal with it every day. I wake up every morning to wrestle it down, to tape to my torso. Sometimes I can ignore it too, until someone says, "Hey Betty, wanna go out?" And I hem and haw and give excuses and apologies while that extra limb is punching me in the back of the head, because last time I went to the bar I had a panic attack over my cream soda and threw up on the sidewalk. Slow steps, even if you don't feel any traction beneath your feet, is how to survive, no matter how small those steps feel. I didn't show up 4 years ago, but you bet your ass I'm showing up now. I was living in a rural ass town and there were some white power groups there along with major sexists. I worked with a guy who saw all women as less than human, and he would actively hurt us. He would push us into ovens when we would get food from them. When I cleaned out the massive industrial soup making bowls every night, he would wait for me to soup it up, push me in, close the top and turn it on. You would have 15 to 25 seconds to get out of a slippery soapy human-sized bowl before you started to get burns. He'd trap you with stock in the freezer. One co-worker had her fingers chopped off by him. Us ladies banded together to fight him, but higher ups told us, "Oh, he's just a little socially inept. Ignore him." He showed no remorse. If we died, it'd be like a dog dying. One night one of the younger, more progressive alpha males at my work hit me up after a night of drinking, and I told him everything. He made a few calls, and the next day I came into work, and the assaulter had black eyes, broken limbs. Word was he grabbed some of his friends, beat the living shit out of him, blackmailed him, and told him if he got within 5 fucking feet of a girl they'd come do it again. He stopped after that.